On June 9th, this entire area was consumed with smoke. The Hyde Park fire grew to over 87,000 acres. 259 homes were burned and 1 life was lost. Tonight, we take you inside the stories that make up the Hyde Park fire. We start off tonight with the first look into the Hyde Park fire. And I remember day one driving through Horsetooth, and people were pulled over by the hundreds watching as the flames encircled homes. And the first guy I ever talked to thought for sure his house was gone, and all he kept telling me was how devastated he was for his twin girls who lost everything.
Not well. They're really upset. They'll be 5 here at the end of the month, and so they're really upset, you know.
With the only way to tell the status of your property is to do what Kyle Ellis and his family did, see an actual picture of it.
It was a total loss, burned to the ground, nothing left except the my kid's swing set in the front yard, just the steel frame. It was far enough away from any trees that, you know, burned all the paint off, melted all the swings, but just the frame was there.
A neighbor took a picture of Kyle's house on Saturday, and since then, Kyle, his wife, and their 5-year-old twin girls have moved into a camper. And in general, the people that we have talked to are hopeful and understand that this is one of the dangers that comes with living in the foothills.
They cried when we told them. They cried last night at bedtime. They cried this morning when they woke up. But, you know, they're tough.
Now, the folks we talked to the first couple of days, they were just a few of thousands who were worried that they'd come home to a house that's no longer standing. And as you can see behind me, this house got completely burnt, but the house right next to it remained untouched. And for Ryan Hodak, he just wasn't sure what he'd come home to.
So these trees were full, they were beautiful. When it snowed, it looked like a mountain oasis, right? And that's why we lived up here. The gutters melted and burned. There's definitely all the window cracks. It just got so hot that that glass, you know, cracked due to its expansion. Seeing the house was a good thing, but to round the corner and see all of the fire and the devastation, it was just a heart-sinking moment. It's like you realize that the landscape has changed. The fire affects people differently. You know, some people, it took their possessions and their memorabilia and things that they were really tender to their heart. And, you know, to others, it took their land, the reasons that they moved up here. So we're gonna cut down all these trees, then hydro seed behind it to really give that kickstart that we need. And then we're gonna have some tree planting parties with friends and family.
So this is the remains of our outdoor thermometer, and as you can see, we kind of exceeded its capacity.
Driving up to Joe and Dee Skelton's property is sobering. White ash and debris pile high where their house used to be.
Asked me if I'd heard about the house, and I said no, and he says, well, I've got bad news. You've lost the house.
Joe and Dee have lived at this house for almost 22 years. This is the 4th time they've been evacuated. And every time since now, they've been able to come back home.
And I think all of us thought, okay, it's blowing past us, we're going to be okay. So we didn't get probably a lot of the things out that we would have if we had really felt like it was, we weren't going to come back to it, we would have gotten out. I mean, we had, probably $40,000 or $50,000 worth of original art. My wife is much more on the emotional side, and you know, even today, she'll suddenly think of something that she said, like 2 days ago, she was suddenly sitting there thinking about something. She says, I didn't get the baby books out. And just, you know, broke into tears. She said, of all the things I could have gotten out, why didn't I get the baby books out?
When the family first came up to the property, they were able to dig through the debris and find small items that didn't get destroyed. But for the most part, everything got completely burned.
And she came up and said, are you guys going to rebuild? And I said, of course we're going to rebuild. Why wouldn't we? We love this place. You couldn't, you know, we've said all along, you couldn't dynamite us out of here.
Those who are still left with their homes can thank the 2,000 plus firefighters that flew in from all over the country, the multiple air tankers, and the 170 fire engines. This next story takes you inside the place that the firefighters called home. It was built in less than 24 hours and now is home to 2,000 crew members. This mini city tucked in the foothills of northern Colorado is a well-oiled machine that is absolutely essential to putting this fire out.
So I guess I would describe it as a very energetic, a very dynamic, a very engaging, energized environment. It's a place where friendships are made, stresses are relieved, and people come home. This is when you work in a job such as a firefighter, you're risking your life potentially every day, and the people you come with, the people you work with, the people who you surround yourself with, are family, and that is an incredible bond that can be lifelong.
Now this area isn't buzzing with activity anymore, but just 2 weeks ago, media gathered right here as Incident Commander Bill Honenberg gave the latest on the High Park fire. He's been commanding the charge for 2 weeks now. He and his team are essentially responsible for the biggest fire in Colorado history. So how does a firefighter from Grand Junction become the commanding officer?
Well, pretty much everybody who moves up to the incident command level starts as a firefighter, which I did. Then I went into the command area of operations section chief on up to the incident commander at the type 2 level, which is, complex fires, and then recently to the type 1 level.
He has had 39 years of experience both in the U.S. Forest Service and in the Bureau of Land Management. He currently lives in Grand Junction, where he manages a wildland fire program. Bill's worked his way up over the years to a Type 1 management team, which is what is currently managing the High Park fire. This team deals with national and state level incidents and has the most training experience. Bill said that what has prepared him for handling this fire is the combination of knowing and understanding people both working on the fire and the community around the fire. And secondly, just good insight into wilderness fires.
First day, I think I said something to the effect that my team's goal is to get this fire where we want it so this community can return to a more normal situation, normal condition for the residents who were affected.
Coming up on the High Park Fire Special, we'll take you behind the fire lines. Welcome back, I'm Alex Ruiz. We continue tonight with our special on the High Park fire. Now on day 12 of the fire, we were taken behind the fire lines, and this was the first time anyone besides fire personnel were able to see what we've been hearing about for the past 2 weeks. Day 12 of the High Park fire, and as more than 50% of it is contained, we got a behind the scenes look to see what those flames have been doing. A 19-car media tour traveled through the foothills of the Poudre Canyon and saw burned areas everywhere. One home on County Road 29C was left to ashes, although the homes around it were seemingly untouched.
The only one that we lost, and there was no particular reason that this home was vulnerable. Basically, when a fire comes through any area, it could be the smallest ember that catches on almost anything.
Another residence along the Poudre Canyon was also destroyed by the fire, but crews are certainly working overtime to try and make sure that number doesn't increase.
Basically, again, trying to save as many residences and other improvements as possible.
While firefighters battled the blaze here in the foothills, evacuees at the ranch in Loveland were just trying to figure out what their future was going to look like.
Oh, it's a relief, and it's also a little scary.
Yeah, why is it scary?
Just because we don't know what we're going to go back to. But it's still good.
Today at the ranch, you could feel the tension and anticipation in the air as people poured into the evacuation center. Some knew what they were going to hear, and others were uncertain, but just wanting to know something about their house.
Well, we're about to find out. We might get to go home today. So, otherwise we don't know where we'll go tonight.
There's three different families that are related to me that have buildings, have houses up there, and they're really having a hard time with it.
And as people came out of the meeting, you could tell just by looking at their faces what news they had just heard.
I'm pretty sure half of ours is gone and half of the property is still there, just by what it says on the internet.
Now, firefighters are doing everything they can to get people home, but for many, the waiting game continues.
As temperatures cooled down at the end of June, firefighters were able to get a better grip on the fire. And by the beginning of July, full containment was finally reached. The first day of this fire, flames were raging, the smoke was thick, and Fort Collins watched in amazement as the foothills burned. As firefighters rolled in day after day battling the blaze, exhaustion and fatigue set in. And if it wasn't for the progress they made, this new incident team wouldn't be in the position they are today. The map on the first day of the fire was covered in red, signifying fire activity. And as of this morning, black lines symbolizing containment are everywhere. Once the High Park fire was fully contained, the cleanup process began. But again, Mother Nature had a mind of its own. Heavy rain on the burned areas led to mudslides.
This gate is the start of what used to be the driveway to Yoko Frank's house. And now it looks like a mud bath.
Because of fire. Mudslide because fire.
The fire came within inches of Yoko's house. It burned all the way around, scorching trees and leaving burn marks on her handcrafted decorations.
I just so happy to be home till rain comes. It's still okay, it's just staying here if I don't try go to town.
The only way out is down, and at this point, leaving by foot is the only option.
I can stay till I really can go drive.
Crews worked tirelessly all day long to clear the mud on the Poudre Canyon Highway. 3 times this weekend, Highway 14 was shut down because of the massive amounts of mud running down the foothills, all because the fire burned vegetation that stops landslides. Officials are asking people traveling in this area to watch for falling trees and be aware of debris from the storms. In a press release put out by the U.S. Forest Service, 1 recreational residence was lost because of the mudslides, and others have been damaged.
Restoration is underway. As all residents evacuated in the High Park fire can now return home, they're assessing the damage and trying to figure out what exactly to do next. This house along Davis Ranch Road was completely destroyed in the fire. Trees inside the property are being cut down because of how dangerous they are. This is the normal scene driving through the dirt roads up in Bellevue and LaPorte. Residents are cleaning, gutting, and moving. Insurance companies, Red Cross disaster relief vehicles, and renovation companies are moving quickly to aid residents.
Our goal is to help them get through that process, to be there as a resource and make sure that they have the resources that they need to move into this, what we call a new normalcy of life for them.
It was surreal because this thing was moving so fast and so hard that it became a sprint. It was a sprint for the first couple of days.
There was a lot going on all at once. This was an unprecedented fire in Larimer County, and it took all of our resources plus a lot more to be able to bring this fire under control.
The fire's acting like it would in the middle of the day. It's huge flame, it's running down. It was surreal. At that point, you couldn't believe what was going on, but you had to deal with it. We went door to door, and everything in you said, you shouldn't be here. There was nothing that made sense to be in that canyon because you had no idea if you'd be trapped in it. But we had to do what we had to do, and we had to warn folks.
I would say that there's a general feeling of relief now due to the fact that the fire is 100% contained and has been for a couple weeks now. However, the fire danger for this area has not gone away even with the rains that we've received in the past week or so.
That's easy for people to see the scope and scale, but for me, it was one home. Whether they burned out or their property burned or their community was essentially wiped out.
Fort Collins and Larimer County in general, we have a lot of great people who live here.
Around our state, from our communities, and came together for such an important cause. Seeing that and how the community responded, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope.
There are a lot of strong people in Larimer County, and we will rebuild and we will come back better than we were before.
And we at Northern Colorado 5 have counted it such an honor to cover the stories of the High Park fire, and we'll continue to bring you more coverage. And we just want to thank all of those who have helped preserve our beautiful foothills. For Northern Colorado 5, I'm Alex Ruiz. Have a good evening.